Asleep, you can go, oh, they're in the car ride with Melissa.
All right, well, I show it's 4 o'clock. So we'll go ahead and get started here. I don't know if Brad's on or not. But start anyway. Brad, are you on to do the formalities of the meeting, or do you want me to just go ahead? Doesn't look like he's joined. So I'm just going to go ahead on agenda approval. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
I move to approve the agenda.
I'll move to approve. I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Approval of the minutes from the last meeting. Has everybody had a chance to review those? Any corrections? Hearing none, can I have a motion to approve the minutes?
I move to approve the minutes from the last meeting.
Second.
All those in favor? Wave. Opposed? All right. And I see that Brad's now joined. Brad, you do a much better job at this than I do.
No, you got this. This is great.
Oh, yeah.
I'm coming in hot from a different meeting, so please keep rolling if you don't mind.
Oh, no, not a problem. With that, I think TCG is the next item on the agenda. I did send out to the committee members the recommendation from TCG that we received yesterday, and everyone should have received that yesterday. And then it's also posted out on the website. Rosie put it out with the agenda for those of you who are not committee members but have joined us as guests for today's meeting. You can access that on the board docs website through the agenda item. With that, let me make sure that Mike, are you on?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Kathy?
Yep, I can hear you. Okay. I want to introduce, I think most of you have already had an introduction with Mr. Cochran from TCG. Mike and I have been working together on the data component of the study, and he has come up with their recommendation, and I'll let him run through that recommendation now. This meeting today is really just for everyone to have opportunity to review the recommendations, ask questions, digest anything that you need to. And I'm pretty sure during this meeting today, there'll be several questions and probably not answers to all of those questions. So I'm anticipating that we will meet again as a committee shortly to discuss the next steps. But I did want to get this in everybody's hands today, as we had previously discussed. Blake, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, I just want to ask Mike that if you would kind of give us guidance in terms of what's going to be the easiest method for you answering questions, whether you go in sections and you want to pause, if you would kind of provide us that guidance, that will help as we're having our discussion.
I'm glad to stop and answer questions. If someone asks something that I think I'm going to answer later, I'll say so. But other than that, feel free to ask whatever you want.
We'll
And
proceed
I
with
think
that.
it will make more sense to wait till I get through though. I'll be fairly brief. I'm sorry, Kathy.
And if you have questions during that you don't want to forget, go ahead and put them in the chat and we can always come back to those as well and revisit those. So with that, I will turn it over to Mike.
Okay. Well, all of you know the background on the plan, so I won't cover that. That was part of the write-up that we did. When we originally met with the administration about the plan, the discussion was to set up a supplemental defined contribution retirement plan where everybody would have an account balance of their own and put the same amount of money for everyone. But they asked us to look at the plan and let them know what we thought of that idea. And when we looked at the plan, our reaction was that that did not appear to be an equitable way to handle dealing with the discrepancy between IPERS and DMTRS. So our recommendation was that we try to look at a way to make some type of improvement in the retirement of the DMTRS participants to make it a more equitable process. And we started with looking at IPERS. I mean, that's the elephant in the room. We can't avoid the fact that it exists. But we built a model to look at what the IPERS retirement benefit would be for each of the active participants. Then, with the help of Kathy and the actuary, we put together a model comparing that to the DMTRS annuity and balance. Now, remember that in a traditional pension plan, you don't have an account balance. You have an annuity. That's it. In the DMTRS plan, you actually have an account balance, and that's what provides your individual annuity. It's a very different kind of plan. So we had to try to look at the balance that each person would have in DMTRS and try to project that forward to retirement, or if an individual was already at retirement, how far past that would you try to look at whether it's equitable or not? So we went through all that. We spent many hours on this. We did examples with Kathy. Your district has a system that makes these individual calculations. Those are not done by the actuary. So it was really very difficult to do, but we believe we built a model that was reasonably close. Now, if we actually take any action, we will get the data from your system and make sure that the figures that are in our model are exactly correct if you do anything going forward. So then we looked at really three different things. We said, well, what if we took the present value of the annuity, the account balance of DMTRS, and tried to project a retirement and compare that to IPERS? What would it cost to make those equal? Well, it was astronomical. So we then said, well, what if we tried to make the annuities the same? Because those don't exactly equate. Particularly because IPERS is not a cash balance plan. So we looked at that, and that was just, the numbers were astronomical, which you would have expected, because when you looked at converting your plan several years ago, the cost was going to be 12 million plus all the plan assets. So then we said, well, what if we took a percentage, we looked at each person's final average salary projected forward using the DMTRS factors. Now, DMTRS projects salaries forward at 3% per year. and it uses a 4.5% earnings rate, and it has its own mortality table. The mortality table says if you retire at age 60, how many years are you expected to live? And those are very different among different plans. So we used the DMTRS factors to say what would the percentage of the DMTRS annuity provide as a replacement ratio at the individual's projected retirement date. And now the retirement date we used was the IPERS date. Why? Because it's more reasonable. The DMTRS retirement age for everyone is 55. That is extraordinarily young for a retirement system. When you think about the fact that you've got to accumulate enough money to pay someone a pension, if you start at 55 and they live 30, 40 years, that is an enormous amount of money. It's very, very hard to make a system work that way. So
Mike, can I stop you for just a second? So by
Yes.
IPER's assumption is rule of 88, 62-20, or 65. Did you use all three of those or just simply rule of 88?
No, we used all of them.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and we calculated if this person retires in the future with a 3% salary growth with their current years of service, and they work until that IPERS retirement age, what would that retirement age be if they were in IPERS? And that did raise the level some. It took, instead of 55, it took many people to, 58, 60, 65, somewhere, in there. That way, it gave us a little more reasonable chance of making this work. And so the equation was simple. We said, okay, at that date that you reach your IPERS retirement age, but you're in DMTRS, what percentage of your final average salary would DMTRS provide you? And that varies tremendously by person. For some people it's 20%, for some people it's 60%, for some people it's over 100%. But we looked at that. And then we said, well, what if we tried to raise everyone to a certain percentage of their final average salary? So if your final average salary was 60,000, and through all these calculations, we said, well, if you retire from DMTRS at 60, you're going to have 30% of your income to live on. Well, what if we'd raise that to 40%, 45%? What if we try to raise that up? What would it cost to try to raise that to a higher level for everyone and everyone to the same level? Well, unfortunately, even that would cost millions of dollars, tens of millions over your lifetimes, and millions of dollars per year. And it would just, it's not possible. Our conversations with your administration was that it wouldn't allow you to educate students. It would take too much money out of the budget to even raise it a small percentage if you take that approach. So that approach wouldn't work either. So we essentially tried 3 different approaches. All of them were extremely expensive and untenable for the finances of the district. So then we said, well, okay, let's try to come up with a formula that is controllable, where the dollar cost is controllable by the district based on the budget each year, based on what they can afford to spend. And if we take that money, how can we allocate that equitably among all active participants? How can we make that work? And let me show you an example. And this is in the report, but let me just go over this. Can I share my screen? Let's see, here we go.
You should be
Can I
able
share
to,
my screen, Kathy?
you should be able to using the little share button next to the red leave button at the top upper right-hand corner.
Yes, I see that.
Mike is a
Uh,
Zoom person, not a Teams person.
Yeah, unfortunately. So if I hit the share button, how do I control what it shares? I pull up my, it says no files available. Maybe well, I'll just have to talk through it. I don't know how to make this work. I thought I got it to work when we did this before.
Mike, what part of the presentation are you trying to share, and I can share it?
Well, it's in the spreadsheet. It's not in the presentation. Because I want to use a simpler example. Oh, you've got the report. Let me see. I think I have that in the report.
I
Yes.
was gonna say,
Okay.
Mike, do you
Go
want the
to
Susan,
page
John,
3
and Jane?
of the PDF.
So
And
is this what you
show
want to
that-
share? Let me see if I can.
Page 3 of the final report, at the bottom of the page is a chart.
Right there.
Kathy, can you zoom in?
That's it. Okay.
Yep, I'm going to. I'm trying to manage my multiple screens here. Whoa. A little
Yeah.
large.
You over zoomed, Kathy.
I know.
There.
Big there.
There we are.
Can everybody see that all right?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so let's say that we had 3 people and each of them had a different percentage of their final average salary that would be covered by their DMTRS annuity. So Susan Sample is going to get 55% of her final average salary from DMTRS. John is going to get 45% and Jane's going to get 35%. So we said, well, how can we distribute that equitably so that it helps raise that percentage over time? The chart is backwards. I see that. Yeah, this is actually reversed. I didn't realize that. So reverse those numbers. So basically, Susan, who's going to get 55%, would get $259 out of that. I'm sorry. And let's say we're getting everybody $1,000 across the board. So Susan would get $259. John would get $333, and Jane would get $407. And I'm sorry, I reversed the numbers in the chart. I just now realized that. So it's correct I'm sure it's correct in the attachment, but my example didn't come out right. So the idea is that we try to give more money to the people who are going to get less money at retirement, and we are less a percentage. And over the years, that would raise them up. And in the attachment that I sent with that report, that's exactly what it shows. It shows that if we do this over and over, year by year, then gradually we'll raise Jane to a higher percentage of replacement ratio. John will also go up, but not quite as much. And Susan will go up, but not nearly as much as the others. So that at the end of some number of years, the goal would be that we would bring everybody to a more equitable level. Every year, everybody gets an allocation, but it's the inverse of their retirement replacement. So the higher your replacement percentage, the lower the dollar amount, and vice versa.
Mike, can I stop you?
The chart that I attached, it actually shows that, over so many years, that's what would gradually happen. Of course, it would depend on how much money was put in the plan, but that would be the goal. The goal would be to have a defined contribution supplemental plan that would more equitably treat the participants in the DMTRS retirement plan.
Mike, can I stop you? Because I have to admit, I don't fully understand that particular chart, but I'm going to make some statements just to see if I'm on a general understanding. Would it be fair for me to say and assume that employees that would be in alignment in terms of equal years, that an employee who is closer to retirement is going to earn more initially because they have a greater gap than the person who is younger, and that in a sense they're going to catch up over time? If I was to take this particular chart example, is that a fair statement, or am I off base on that?
Well, not exactly, because we would project everyone's salary out to their retirement age. So at 3% a year. So a person who's 45 years old is we're, you know, and if Kathy, can you go down to the chart that's attached to the report? And you'll have to shrink the you'll have to shrink this it's the next the very end of the chart. There should have been a page. If you're in the
I
PDF,
don't show anything further.
there's a PDF. Let me try the share again then.
All right, I'll stop sharing.
Let me,
For those of you who have the PDF document, it's the very, very last page that he's referring to. It says sample on the top. And I
okay,
know that not everyone sees or has it, but many of us do. I'm sure, Mike, that that's where you're going to.
yeah, that's it. So I'll just, you know, some people are already, you know, different people are different ages, different salaries. So, you know, the whole idea is if we project your salary to your DMTR, I'm sorry, to your IFRS retirement age, what percentage of that DMTRS pension or annuity would replace your income? So I'm for those of you who have the chart, I'll go to the second person on the chart. The second person on the chart is 45 years old, has a projected retirement age of 57. Projected final average salary of 98,000. But keep in mind that at 45, their current salary may be 60,000 because we're projecting out a good many years at a 3% salary growth. And this person's IFRS annuity would be 38,000. So that would give them a replacement ratio of about 38% or 39%. So we go through and everybody gets the inverse allocation. That person would get $1,200. I'm sorry, if we put 200,000 in, and that's just a sample number. That's not. I use that because it would be enough money to have a fairly significant allocation to everybody. So in this example, that person would get $1,200. And if we project out that person's retirement, that would give them a pretty significant account balance because we'd be putting this in from the time they're 45 to 57. So about 13 years at a decent income growth, and would give them a pretty big account balance. And then we'd say, okay, how much can we pay them every year out of that account balance? And that, in this example, would be 27,000 a year. So that would give them about 40,000 a year, which would be an $1,800 a year increase. So it would raise that person from 38.69 to 40.6. So it'd be about almost a 2% increase in that individual's retirement replacement ratio. And you can see, if you have access to that page, you can see in the far yellow, the yellow column all the way to the right. And I'm sorry, I don't know what's wrong, but I'm losing power. Okay. Well, I'm about to lose my power, and I don't know why. I'm going to have to call in on my phone. My computer is dying, and I don't know why, because I'm plugged in. Something's wrong. Let me try to call in on the phone and do this.
While Mike steps away, Kathy, can I ask a question that is about the general assumptions? Can I ask, and this question is going to sound weird, but why are we currently using a 3% assumption for salary increase, given that over 90% of our DMTRS active members are off step? And historically, we know that, I mean, you'd have to go back decades before you would see an ongoing 3%. I know when I have had projections ran, they don't show a 3% salary increase. So I'm curious about that particular assumption, because that assumption plays a huge impact.
Yeah, I think it's that assumption is high. And Mike and I did talk about that. It can easily be changed. It was, if you'll notice on this spreadsheet that I've shared, the factors up here in red, any of those can easily be changed and drive the whole spreadsheet. I think he had said something about, that was one of the actuarial assumptions that was being used, and something else with IPERS. And so that's why he had used that. We typically use like a 1 or 2% when we do projections. We kind of do an average over the past couple years of a salary increase, and not taking into account that you are at the top of that salary schedule either. So we can certainly adjust that and see what that does to the projections as well.
And Kathy, can you talk about where did we lose 60% income replacement in this process? Because two things stand out to me. Number one is we have asked through the last 3 or 4 months whether a 60% income replacement would be the basis of what our discussions were for people with 30 plus years, which is in a sense sort of that IPERS equivalent to Rule of 88. And the second one was that we talked a lot about that there were not going to be these parameters on the budget, which seem now to be glaringly obvious that there was a gigantic barrier. Literally, Mike said we had 3 options, and now we're on option 4, which is the one that could
I'm back
fit
on. Can you hear me?
in the budget. We can hear you, Mike.
Okay, thank you.
So I think, Blake, to answer your questions there, again, all of these replacement ratios are numbers that are plugged into this, and we can change those at any point in time. And I think going in, we specifically stated that the goal was not to match IPERS, but it was to improve the income replacement level. And so
Right.
the 60% is definitely more of an IPERS number than it is a Des Moines teachers number. And I think the goal has always been to increase the the ratio under the Des Moines Teachers Plan, but not necessarily mirror IPERS.
But let's be clear, this chart on the right says we're increasing by an average of 1.1%.
And that's
think-
with the
I think we're
200,000.
missing the mark incredibly. I mean, we can't talk about and say we were at 60% for 15 meetings and then come back and have a proposal that talks about 1%. We're missing the mark.
Well, the idea was to come up with a dollar amount the district could afford. And so I backed into, I tried to come up with a formula that would take whatever the budget could afford and equitably distribute that to the participants in the plan. Because if you've only got, X amount to spend, the question is, how do you spend it? And this was the most equitable way to do that I could see.
Yeah, Mike, and I don't say that. I mean, you're going to be in a position here where you're in the middle of what to me feels like two separate conversations that have been going on through this process. And I feel like this report does not honor the ask, the request, and the work of this committee that has been, at minimum, has gone on for the last 4 or 5 months as we waited to get to this report. And questions that I have asked over and over again was, were there budgetary parameters placed on you, TCG Mike? And the only one that we were told was that we were not going to transfer everyone over to IPERS because we knew that that had a huge price tag. That ship sailed for us long ago. And when I read your report, it clearly tells me that you were given a budget parameter. And it even looks like the budget parameter was actually given a dollar amount, which was something that we were told would not happen. No. And at the school board level, we were told that that wasn't going to happen.
No,
Blake,
I was not given a dollar amount.
If you'll recall at the beginning of this conversation, we talked about that 200,000 was for an example only. It is not an agreed upon dollar amount for the district at all. It is for an example only.
But it is Mike's recommendation. Like if you read the text, it says my recommendation is $200,000. That's where I'm struggling, is because if that's the recommendation that Mike is giving, I'm curious as to how we went from other options that were millions and millions of dollars and how we landed on just a $200,000 recommendation. So I appreciate that number can change. I'm struggling because the written document says our recommendation is that you spend $200,000 and this is how you do it.
Well, the recommendation is how to allocate the money. If I should have said that's a dollar amount that seems reasonable rather than a recommended dollar amount. The recommendation is how to make the allocation. When I went over the dollars that it would cost to do any of the other scenarios, we were talking millions. And we're talking, to just raise the replacement ratio a very small amount in one scenario was $1.7 million a year.
And I think, Mike, I would tell you that this committee, and I believe our school board wants to know that. They want to know all of the options and all of the costs. And Mike, my ask to you is, are you willing to change bullet 4 under executive summary of TCG's recommendation, where you write, the district would determine the total contribution to the plan each year based on what the budget will allow. TCG recommends that the first year $200,000 be funded to the plan. Are you willing to change that recommendation to better meet an objective of getting a whole lot closer to 60% income replacement? Because that's where I'm struggling, is you put the number in there as a recommendation.
Because the last meeting we had was when I showed millions of dollars, you wouldn't allow you to educate your students. So I don't want to recommend something that can't be done. The 200,000 was simply a way, and I'd be glad to change the 200,000 to say, I think that would be a good place to start. But the recommendation is the way to allocate the funds, not the dollar amount. The district has to decide the dollar amount based on what they can afford.
I have a couple of questions. I put my hand down. One of the things I was wondering about was, it says that we would be able to put aside the money based on what the budget would allow. How would that be determined? Because, I mean, we could do this for a couple of years and then say, oh, the budget doesn't allow it anymore. We're not going to be able to afford it at all. So I guess I'm wondering, how do we know what the budget would allow? Like, that seems a very nebulous language. And then where is this money going to go into? Does it go as a contribution into DMTRS, or does it go into a 401B or a 403B, or?
Okay, let me address the second part, because that's in the recommendation. Our recommendation is that you set up a local Des Moines Public School 401A plan. The reason for the 401A, there are good reasons for using that plan that are in the report. Primarily, it won't conflict with your 403B or 437 plans. It lends itself to doing this kind of plan. And the district would set up a supplemental retirement plan, and that the investments that were offered in the plan would be very, very low cost, unlike many of the 403B. And that's a national issue, it's not a local issue. But for example, TIA, as an example, and TIA Crest, that some of you may be familiar with, they're probably the largest provider of defined contribution accounts and 403B accounts in higher education. They have what are called target date funds or life cycle funds that say, if we calculate your years to retirement using a formula, and we put you in a fund that will invest according to the years you have left to retirement. The annualized average return on that fund as of 12/31, and I know we've had a rough market, but this will pass, back to inception of this fund was 11%, many, many years. And the fee is around 10 basis points, even lower than Vanguard. So if you used a 401A plan that had investments that are very highly likely to provide that kind of return, that will help people in maximizing their money. So the idea would be you would set up a local supplemental retirement plan that would be very low cost, very well designed, because the design of the plan is critical to helping make this work as well as it can. You don't want your dollars wasted on fees and administrative costs. So that was the idea, that you have a very simple local plan that would be very low cost and very good investments that would help achieve those goals. And that would be easy to set up, relatively easy. I mean, you gotta have lawyers involved and all that, but it'd be relatively easy to set up. And that would maximize the earnings on those dollars. And that's where the district money would go.
Okay, I remember that from the document that I read yesterday. I guess I'm still wondering about, I mean, we know we have a contribution disparity, that Des Moines Public contributes more to our IPERS retirement than it does to DMTRS retirement, that there is that discrepancy. And that's part of the problem. The other part of the problem is that this problem has been going on for so long that compounding interest over time means that without those extra contributions, it's going to be very difficult to make up the gap. And I think that's what you're saying with your model, saying it would be, prohibitively expensive to make up the gap with the time remaining for people who are close to retirement. Is that correct?
And let me explain, yes, and let me explain the fundamental difficulty. I want to use life insurance as an example. Let's say that you're a 40-year-old couple and you have 2 children and you make a teacher, you're both teachers. So, you have a decent income, you have a house, you have a mortgage. But if one of you were to die, it could leave your family devastated. So you decide, well, you know what, we need $1 million of life insurance to take care of the other partner if one of us dies, and our children, and fund their college and all that. Well, where are we going to get $1 million? Well, the answer is an insurance company sets up a pool. And for probably, if you're 40 years old, you buy a good term policy, you can probably buy that for $20, $30 a month. And if one of you dies, you get $1 million. Well, how can they do that? Because they're collecting that $20 or $30 or $50 a month from tens of thousands of people. And all that money is going into a pool. And the only people who get money out of it are the people who die. So there's enough money to pay those big amounts. That's how life insurance in its purest form and term insurance works. Well, let's take that to a pension plan. The way IPERS works is it's a defined benefit plan. It's a pension plan. So you have a huge pool of money. Nobody has an account balance. That if you get a statement that says you have an account balance, that's just how much you put in plus interest. That's not really your account balance. That's fictitious. So everybody's in this giant pool. Some people are going to live to 100, but some people are going to die at 50. But all their money's gone in. There may be a small death benefit, but it's So the point is that this whole big pool of money is able to pay people a retirement income based on a retirement formula, a replacement ratio, if you would, so that everybody gets a decent pension because you're all in one big pool. You're not in one account. With a defined contribution plan or a cash balance pension plan like you have, or a 401k or a 403b, they're all alike in one way. Everybody has their own account. You have your own boat. If there's not enough money in your boat when you get to retirement, tough luck. If you've got a lot of money when you get to retirement, that's great. But that's the difference between a defined contribution plan and a true pension plan. Now, I'm not questioning the judgment of the people that set this up, but I am saying that that's why a true pension plan works better for giving you a retirement income than a plan where everybody has their own account. Because your account is affected by so many things, by your earnings, by what goes in, by your age, by by how long you live, but it's only your account. You don't get to reach over in the other boat and say, well, I'm only getting 25% at retirement. Susie over here is getting 60%. Susie, let me reach over and get some of your money so I can retire better. That's not how your plan works. IPERS does work that way. IPERS has a giant pooled trust that works in an actuarially sound manner to pay everyone a certain pension amount. Excuse me. And that is a fundamental difference between
Well, isn't
the two
that also
plans.
the reason why people in DMTRS can opt out with a lump sum when they retire? They can just take their account. Is that right?
Well, that's true. That's the advantage of having your own account, but you can see that that's not necessarily a good model. It's good for some people. It's terrible for others. And if you look on that chart, if you look at that chart on that last page, it tells the story. You got some people who are going to retire at 25% of their income and some at over 100.
Mike, can I just this is really just an opinion statement. I'm disappointed to see that you're using an 11% interest on contribution for that TIAA CREF account. I pulled up the code there, and I'm going to assume and trust that on 12/31 that it was in fact 11%. I won't throw our financial guys in the middle here. We've had these discussions over and over and over and over again. But I think making an assumption of 11% and using that to project forward for people, that's tough. I mean, it'd be amazing if it would occur. But to use that as a guaranteed assumption in here for people that we're trying to fix and address a gigantic chasm, I'm struggling with. I mean, it
Well,
doesn't sit right
I
for
would
me.
disagree. I disagree. If you look at anyone who invests in a 60-40 equity bond mix or fixed income mix over a long period of time, and you can read this if you go to Dave Ramsey, you go to Scott, if I remember the column. I mean, if you look at any reputable financial columnist, all of them are going to say, if you stay the course, if you invest in a really good, well-managed pooled fund like the TIAA-CREF funds, or if you look at what the state offers in their plan, they have some Vanguard funds that are very similar. The returns on those over a long period of time are above 10%. And I think that's but my point is, if you let people make their own investment decisions, they invest themselves into oblivion. When the market craters, everybody jumps out and goes in a money market and they lock in their losses. You know, that you've got to use an investment approach, in my opinion, that is going to reasonably guarantee success for people. So I'm not advocating a 403B type plan where everybody gets to choose their own investment. I'm advocating a plan where everyone's investment is based on their age, and you use a very low cost, high performing target date fund, whether it's TIA or Vanguard or Fidelity. They all have, over a long period of time, these kinds of returns.
And this
I
is
think
really just commentary for people who are listening in. Any of you who are listening in, go ahead, go on TIAA-CREF 2035 target-based fund and look and see the historical rates and returns. I can't find the 11% number, so that's all I'm going to say. I do understand that they're going to be a high
Well,
number.
I did pull it off there. I did pull it off of Morningstar when I put that in. I did use 1231, and if you use today's return, it's going to be a lot less because we've had a terrible market for the last 3 months. But if you go back, and maybe you should use Vanguard or one that's an older fund. But if you look at any target date fund that's a 60-40 mix that's been around for 15 years, you're going to see these kinds of returns. Again, I'm talking about low cost, very low cost funds that are managed with an index approach like a Vanguard or dimensional fund family. This is, those returns are there. If you go read Dave Ramsey, you go read Scott Burns, all the really good commentators are going to say the same thing. I'm not making this up. This is how good financial advisors work.
Mike, there's a comment.
But we can return it. But we can learn. I mean, if you lower it to 8%, it's not going to have an enormous effect.
There's a comment in our comments. If you could please provide the ticker of the funds that you're quoting.
Okay, I'll have to look it up.
I also think, like, you're talking about folks that are, 10, 15 years from retirement. So if you're looking at like historical equity returns over the last 40 years, maybe you can get a total return of 11%. I think the standard assumption for a lot of financial planning is 8% for equities. Fixed income rates, new money rates right now, I mean, you have to get in some pretty toxic garbage to get 11% returns on fixed income bonds right now. Maybe if you were to go to like the PIMCO funds, the total return funds that Bill Gross ran when rates were falling from the teens down to the low single digits, you can get total return of more than 10% in those funds. But I would agree that over a long horizon, 11% doesn't seem reasonable on a go-forward basis for this target group specifically.
That's a decision the district can make. That's my recommendation. I'll stand by it. That's how I invest. And we handle billions of dollars of investments at our company.
And Mike,
Mike,
the only reason it matters is because, if we use that 11% number, it automatically inflates, the impact of that income replacement. So I'm looking at that income replacement target and I stop and I go, well, some people maybe get it, maybe, but I can't as an advisory board member who then is going to have to talk to the superintendent, the CFO, and the school board. I'm going to have to look and say, and I'm going to have 150 active members that are going to be emailing me, and some of them are texting me as we speak. They're looking at this and saying, is it reasonable that that money would go over there and earn 11%? I'm going to tell you no. I just heard Brad Becker say no. And I think when I talk to Alan Goody and John Augustine, they're going to say, ooh, that's going to be a tough, tight outcome goal. So I just think we need to be
I don't know if it's overly consequential to the recommendation either, right? I mean, if I look at what we're kind of recommending,
if you use 8%, it's not going to have a huge.
So I guess if it's not consequential to the recommendation, I wouldn't put such a questionable assumption out there of 11%, because I think what you're recommending is on average 403B or 401A contribution equal to on average 1 to 2% of salary, which I think we had kind of flagged beforehand. I think the value add here is the equity that you're adding to this across different members. You're looking for better outcomes, more consistent outcomes, so that you're not benefiting one class over the other, like DMTRS has historically. You're trying to make up for past mistakes through a more equitable distribution of additional capital. I think that's a good value add. I just don't think 11% is necessary, and it sort of just raises an eyebrow, I think, to see a number that high. And it's just not consequential. So I think like it's not relevant. So why step out on a limb there to say 11% is reasonable, I guess. So
my main point is not to allow self-direction of these funds, because if you do that, people are going to be in fixed annuities earning 2%, and they're not going to get anywhere close to the returns they need.
Yeah, I think a lifetime fund is a good recommendation. Like have it be defaulting into a lifetime fund. I think that's a good QDIA. I think that's
we can and if you'd like, I'd be glad to put out several lifetime funds. We can change the report to say if we use Vanguard, we'd have this. We get Fidelity, we'd have this. And then use the average. And the average, I think, is going to be if we use a time period, try to stick in a time period of 2008 or something like that. If you look at it over 10, 15 years, you're going to have returns north of 8%, between 8 and 15. So I think 11 is reasonable, but that I think the point is not the percentage return. And I have the model built where I can change that percentage instantly, and it doesn't make a huge difference. It would make a huge difference if we use 4%, but if we use 8 or 10 or 9 or 11 or 12, it's these are not 20. Most of these time periods are 10 years or less. So I don't think it's going to make an enormous difference. And so I'd be glad to change the report to, quote several different lifestyle funds. But the main point is not the return. It is use lifestyle funds or life cycle funds or target date funds that are going to get people a decent return and not allow your typical 403B self-direction.
Okay, so I think we're good on that component. Go ahead, Jessica. I'm sorry.
So what I'm gathering from this conversation is that there are some concerns about the assumptions and the models, which can be changed. But the model is basically how do we divide a pot of money amongst the actives in a way that would be fairer based on their ending salary, the ending percent of their income. Is that right? Is that the model that we're looking at here? And so no matter what you feed in to the pot or what money it can raise, what interest rates it can get while it's being invested, the model that we're really talking about is how do we divide up a pot of money? Is that right? So I guess I don't have I guess maybe we need to dig into that and to see if that model is of how we divide the money is fair, if that's what we want to go on. But it doesn't address some underlying concerns about how big a pot of money will it be every year? Was there any promise about that? Also, when can we get started on this? Because I have a sense of urgency because we have been waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting to solve the problem, and we haven't solved it. And the time is a very important factor when we talk about investments. So I've got that concern. So I don't know.
And I think I'd add another concern is why are we not talking about moving some people to IPERS? Why are we continuing to say, let's sit in a 4.5% fund with a 3% salary that's not a realistic, it's not going to happen? Why are we continuing to say you're going to be on this trajectory that's actually going to get worse? Because if you continue on a 4.5% trajectory, you're going to get worse. Your pension gap in comparison to IPERS is going to be great. And we're going to, and forgive me, I don't say this to be offensive, but we're going to basically throw about $100, not even per month, at a pension that is a $200,000 to $300,000 problem for people. We had this discussion as an advisory board over a year ago, and 2 years ago, and 3 years ago, and 4 years ago, and we're back to a decision of there's not enough money to go around. You know, children are not going to have teachers. There's going to be no, I mean, at some point, what I hope is that those of you that are listening is that someone's going to actually give a crap about us as employees and actually look at this from the human perspective. I have had people, I know last night, and I don't want to get emotional on here, but like, this is our careers. And we want to continue doing this. And what you're coming back is you're saying, your problem is too big, we can't fix it. We're going to just throw a couple bucks at you and hope that you shut up and that will fix our problem. We are not addressing the problem in this plan. And Mike, that's not on you. I mean, you were given, in my opinion, it sure looks like you were backed into a financial corner where, yeah, if there's only a couple $100,000, there's not a lot of options here. This is immensely, immensely frustrating, and I think I can say that on behalf of all 150 active members and many, 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 if not all of the retired members. This is not a solution. We did not wait 4 months and spend $37,500 on a consultant to be in this place where we were told, I'm sorry, there's no money in the budget. What our board asked for, and I have notes here, I was trying to go back to the quotes. They said they want all of the options. The only option that they didn't want to see was to transfer everyone to IPERS, which we knew had that big price tag. Now, unless if I'm missing something, and I very well may be, where Board Chair Bradley or any of the other board members have shared, they want options. And what we've just done is we've said, here's the cheapest option. For those of you listening, this option is less money than actually just giving us our fairness in terms of IPERS contribution. This is the district continuing to get off on the cheap, and we are less expensive employees, and that inequity must stop.
This is Terry Caldwell Johnson, and I just want to maybe level set here for a moment. I know that this is a really important issue to everyone that's on this call. Employees, you know, union representatives, the district, community members, etc. But a couple things I'm going to offer. You know, any solution that we have to do, or any solution that we determine, is really going to have to allow us to meet all of the requirements of our district without prioritizing one thing over another. We all recognize that we are in a really tough financial spot right now, and our ability to balance all of the competing demands with the limited resources we have is the one thing that the board is going to focus its attention on. I think that there are a couple of other things in play that I really hate to bring up, but I'm going to bring up because I think they're sort of the reality of the situation that we're facing. And I think I've said this before, and I may sound like a broken record, but I do think it's something that has to always be shared as sort of the context for the situation that we find ourselves in. I liken this to someone making an investment. And I may choose Google as my stock of choice, and someone else may choose Abbott Pharmaceutical as their stock of choice. And how those stocks perform have as much to do with the market and the viability of the organization as anything. And I think that where we find ourselves right now, especially with the difference that we have between IPERS and DMTRS, is a choice about an option that someone has made where one has generated a significantly higher return than another, and the other hasn't performed as well. But along the way, we did not recognize how we needed to level set to create a much stronger framework and platform for us to have systems that we have employees in that need to somehow be either more compatible or need to be more comparable. And I think that right now, we're challenged with at least the one option that we have in front of us, and there may be others that we haven't had a chance to probe. But I think that we have to be careful about, not killing the messenger here and being thoughtful about how we level set in a way that allows us to at least get closer to where we need to be while recognizing the limitations that we have from a fiscal perspective, but also the obligation we have to our employees from a moral and ethical perspective. So there are a lot of things in play here, but I think that we have to all consider that not everybody's going to get everything they want, but we also have to consider where we end up in a way that at least gets us closer to where we need to be without being able to maybe fully meet all of the requirements. So I just want to say that because as a board member, those are the things that I think will become part of the discussion that we have as we begin to weigh in and or evaluate not only this recommendation, but others that come before us. And, not to throw a wrench in things, but to just really be sort of the voice of reason here from a board perspective, because at the end of the day, I'm going to be one of the decision makers around that figures out where we end up and where we go. And I want us all to be reasonable, not only in terms of our approach, but also understanding of the limitations that we're faced with as we try to solve an age-old problem that we are not going to be able to just sort of eliminate in one fell swoop. So I'm going to get off my soapbox now, but I just felt it was important that we all just sort of level set here and be really thoughtful about where we are, what we all want to accomplish as a result of this, but also the limitations that exist as we try to get to closure. Thank you.
And
Thanks.
I
Blake.
understand there's limitations, but like you said, ethically and morally, I think we have to remember what Blake said is employees are not being treated equitably at all. We are not being given the same employer contribution as the person that works right next alongside of us who is IPERS. And also this advisory board, I feel like has not been respected. We have proposals out there that were 100% unanimous that were never taken to the school board, that we asked to be taken to the school board. We have asked as an advisory board for multiple options, and we've been given one model. So I just wanted to share that because it's really frustrating as an advisory board member.
Melissa's not able to talk, but she put in the chat. This is absolutely not about the initial choice that people made of DMTRS versus IPERS. The material I was given as a new employee showed that DMTRS would keep up with the contributions compared to IPERS. it isn't only about performance of investments, it's mostly the fact that DMTRS never kept up with their contributions compared to IPERS, which is the choice by DMPS, not necessarily DMTRS members. That was Melissa's comment.
I'm going to share something real quickly. This was something that was shared back with the board on the contributions and the changes in contributions over time. Okay. So we had shared this earlier this year with this whole group. Just the contribution increases and changes over time. And since 2007, you'll notice, if you look down here at the total lines, IPERS employees have had an increase of 2.59% in their contributions, 3.69 in the employer contribution. DMTRS, the employees have increased by 2%, and the employer contribution has increased by 3%. And then I have another sheet here.
But I think with that, Kathy, I mean, I like apples to apples, but that doesn't go back. If you would take that back to 2000, that would show the major discrepancy between DMTRS and the IPERS increase in contributions. But go ahead, and then I'll comment later.
It ignores the investment differences too, right? I mean,
Correct.
IPERS is a much younger population. They can invest in alternatives and equities.
Yes,
so
sir.
they get more of a tailwind.
Yes, sir.
DMTRS skews older, and so there's the total income to DMTRS members. It's not apples to apples because you have to look at like contribution plus return to get to final outcome, and DMTRS is lagging in final outcome for a variety of factors. It's hard to put it into one number. I sympathize with your plight here, Kathy.
Right. Well, what I'm just trying to show that you know, the contribution rates have increased over time. I'm not saying that the plans are equal at all. So please don't take it that I'm saying that. But if you came into the plan prior to 2007 as a 26-year-old, the district rate for DMTRS was 5.01 and IPERS was 5.75. So it was never the same. So I think that that's important to note, you know, and I hear what you're saying, that the person sitting next to you in IPERS is getting more of a district contribution, but they were back when you started as well. That gap might have increased a little bit, but it was never the same.
Yeah, we're litigating things I think that have been hashed over a lot in the past, and I don't know if it's necessarily helpful right now to keep going over this. Maybe, I don't know, talking tactics right now for the active members is maybe a more productive way to think about this. And I don't know, Jessica, to your point around like, we've been talking about this stuff for years and we haven't done anything. I think part of the reason, this is just me as the observer, you know, take my comments in good faith. We keep taking big swings to try to get back to par. And whenever we take a big swing, the price tag looks way too big. Nobody can swallow it. And so we stay where we are. Thinking about this from like a budget perspective, inertia is a very powerful force when it comes to budgets. And just if you can take a time machine, go back 5 years, you would have taken the deal of getting 2% into a 403B or 401A, and then you fight for more because the incremental 2% on top of your 2% is a much smaller ask than the full 10% to get back to par with IPERS. And so I think part of this recommendation that I like is the district is putting a deal out there. Take the deal for now, fight for more in the future. But to your point, Jessica, time matters. We can't keep fighting for this to get the contribution rate up if that means that somebody's only going to get 2 years of contributions instead of 7 or 8 years. And so, I don't know, as I hear this and look for like the best outcome for the actives, discounting in my head for a minute the implication for like district budget and everything else, it seems like taking the deal today and living to fight another day from higher ground might be preferable to continuing to take that big swing. But I don't know, I welcome feedback or reactions or thoughts to that because I understand.
No, Brad, I think
you don't want to like.
I think what I don't disagree with your statements, but I think the part that I am frustrated with and feel from the group is what I was assured by the superintendent by doing this report, that we would have all options on the table. And I don't think Mike was afforded that opportunity or to discuss those with us in the report. And so I know I'm going to follow up with Kathy, and I'm going to follow up with Matt and Tom, because I'm angry, because the whole point of this report was to throw everything on the table and say, here are things. And when I don't feel that Mike was given those parameters, or maybe once he came back with that initial, it was then skewed. Because I totally understand the budget parameters and the concerns as far as that goes. But the whole purpose of this was to get the big picture, so then we could start taking bite-sized pieces. And I feel I don't even have the big picture that everybody was promised. And I'll be honest, I'm angry, but we'll get through it.
Well, and I think, Brad, we have to also consider, I mean, for me, I can understand the storyline you just said. However, for someone who has 17 days to make a decision about accepting the early retirement or the retirement incentive, someone might be saying, I don't really want to leave. You know, I want to continue to work for 3 or 4 more years. And let's be honest, if you look at the employment status of teachers right now, we need people to stay those 3 or 4 more years, because we aren't able to fill all the positions that we have. And that person's going to look at this. I'm going to way simplify it, but I'm going to tell someone who calls me, they're going to say, is this a good deal? I'm going to say, do you want $1,000 a year that's going to go into an investment for a couple years, so you might get a couple thousand ahead, or are you going to take that retirement incentive? And so I think what we owe people, our action is a recommendation that we can send to the school board so that they can discuss and work through, that is comprehensive. Yeah, it might not be that we can do everything today, this week, this month, or this year, but we've got to be willing to say this is the long term of what needs to happen. And this may be a piece of it. IPERS needs to be a piece of it. The contribution rates needs to be a piece of it. And maybe we have not been bold enough. And I would agree. I feel like we have been hamstringed. There's been this constant message of, well, you know, do we want to trust the advisory board? We need some expertise. We need some outside help. And I get that. Well, now we have it in front of us. Okay, we have that expertise in front of us. And literally, it's the recycle of something that we talked about last spring. We've had this exact same conversation about what the number was going to be. And
I don't know if this part of this is in like the report. I need to reread this, but you know, it sounded like they looked at some of the other, you know, more satisfying options, and they said this elephant's not fitting through that doorway, and the elephant's getting bigger. So let's figure out a solution now with what we have to start chopping away at the problem. That sounds like the elephant's not going to fare too well. But I don't know. It seems like this report's more focused on like what's possible, as opposed to some of these bigger solutions that, you know, the price tag is big and getting bigger to have that catch up.
Well, Brad, I agree with you that we should do something rather than continue to do nothing. I understand that it's not satisfactory. I understand that it's not going to solve the problem. I understand that there's 2 things about the report that are encouraging to me, even though a lot of it is disappointing. One thing is that it says phase 1. That's encouraging to me. This other thing that's encouraging to me is that while we did talk about how we could, some of these ideas, we did not come up with a mechanism for how to distribute a pot of money amongst the actives in a way that was fair and equitable. And that's some new thinking that we did not have last year. So those are 2 bright points in the report for me, although I, you know, can hear all the concerns about the assumptions and how much money will be in the pot from year to year and who decides whether or not there's enough money in the budget, those questions. And also the closeness that people have to make a decision in 17 days about whether they're going to retire. That's, or take that incentive. They got a whole nother year. They take it in the next 17 days and they're locked in for one more year, but then they're retiring in 2023. So I can understand that, that tight place to be.
Well, and I
But
think to
I guess
speak
I'm
to
still
that,
thinking we need
Jessica,
to move forward on something because we have been holding out for something better for a really long time.
Yeah,
And
I've heard this.
and
I've heard this conversation reach this point 4 or 5 times, and we always kind of go back to square one and always ask if we could do more. But doing more always comes with a bigger and bigger price tag. Maybe it's changed since rates have come up, and maybe the cost seems smaller now if you were to go back to typers and have them redo that analysis. But I don't know. We've had this conversation before. It never gets over the hump, and the problem never gets smaller.
well, and I think to address one thing that Jessica and Blake have both mentioned, the DMEA will host a Zoom call before that deadline to kind of do Q&A with employees and invite the advisory committee to be a part of that, as we've done in years past. So I know there's a lot of people watching this meeting wondering what to do, and just know we'll have a forum that we'll be able to talk through that and then can meet outside of that. And Kathy, so I know I voluntold you on that, but I know you've been willing to help in the past. And so for all of you out there, we hear you, we stand with you, we know we need to do better, and we'll weather this.
Could I add one thing here? Kathy, can y'all hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
What you haven't seen, and you know, is we built a tremendous model, and you didn't have this before. The model that PCG has built, working with Kathy and the actuary, allows us to put in an unbelievably different number of variables and see instantly what the cost is, what that does to individuals, you know, all that sort of thing. I mean, this is a giant spreadsheet that has many aspects. And so if the board were to say, we want to look at something different, or we want to, instead of 200,000, we want to put in 400,000, and we want to project that forward X years, or whatever, you know, the board wants to do, working with the administration, we now have the tool to do that. That to me is what you've paid for, is building that tool. You did not have that before. I asked a lot of questions before we agreed to take this on, and nobody had answers to the questions I was asking. So maybe I'm too granular in this, that I do these giant spreadsheets, but I do want to point out, you have something now, the district has something that is a tool that you could use going forward. If you decide to do something for now and then look at more for the future, at least you have something that would help you do that.
And I don't want to kill this kumbaya moment. However, it's been unequal since 2000, if I'm understanding correctly, because I'll be honest, I don't pay as much attention as I should. My husband handles the money and I like it that way. But hasn't it been 22 years of kicking it down the road? Isn't that what we're looking at? 22 years of, we're going to come up with something, we're going to do it next year, we're gonna. And doesn't there come a point when you just can't tell me I'm gonna anymore? Because, I mean, considering even the kids that I work with, I'm going to get that turned in. I'm gonna. Well, when? I mean, is it before I die or is it after I die? So I really don't want to mash on the kumbaya of we're headed somewhere, but I'm not buying it. I'm just not feeling that. I'm sorry. That's it.
And Amy, thank you for sharing that. I truly understand everybody's frustration. And in fact, in a meeting earlier today, I said to Matt and Shashank, I said, one of the main frustrations that's going to be voiced in this meeting is we need to do something. We can't just keep talking about it. We need to do something. And so I think we all understand that frustration. We need to come to that point and decide what we're doing and move forward. And I think that was the point of doing this study, was so we now know here's options. Here's what we know we can do. here's a model now that we can plug numbers into, and we need to make a decision so we can move forward, so we can put this to rest and allow the rest of you to be able to plan for your futures, because right now everything is in limbo, and that's not fair to you, and we recognize that.
Can you hear me, Kathy?
Yep, we can hear you, Gordon.
Okay. Well, wasn't for sure I was on. You know, I don't think this is going to affect me one way or the other, but $200,000 doesn't seem like much, but here again, I think Brad makes the point. Hell, let's do something. You know, I mean, this conversation was going on before I did, or before I got on, and probably will continue afterwards. And yeah, the fact that if we do something, maybe we can nibble away at this a little bit. It doesn't look like a terribly satisfactory situation right now, but I guess I'd say let's kind of move ahead and see what happens.
So because we just received this report yesterday and we're all digesting it, I think one thing fundamentally that we need to discuss and either agree or disagree or come to some kind of consensus on is the model that Mike has come up with that assigns and apportions the contribution according to the deficit. So not everybody is going to get an equal amount. And I think in the past, we talked about everybody was going to get a certain percentage. And I'd like to get some feedback from this group on which way are you more comfortable with? Do you like this new model structure that those with the largest deficit get the most? Or are you more comfortable with everybody gets a flat dollar amount? And I think that will help shape how we move forward.
As a model, I thought it was more equitable to try to address the discrepancies between people. So I guess I like the model on the surface. I haven't had a chance to really dig down deep into it, but it seemed like that was more fair than saying everybody gets a certain percentage, because some people just joined in and are at a higher contribution rate just because they joined in the last couple of years and they're close to retirement. So for them, yeah. But for some of us who've been in, well, since the 80s, right? Some of us, you know, some of us are on the short end of that. So it seems to me that it's a little bit more fair if we look at it that way. But that's just, I haven't just looked at the surface of it. I haven't really dug deep.
Kathy, has legal reviewed that? Just because that would be my question for Catherine Binken. Is it legal to distribute any additional funds that way? Where it's,
I have it in legal's hands, so.
okay, that was just gonna be my.
This is Catherine. I received it when everyone else got it, and I can answer specific legal questions. If the question is, can the district use general funds and put it into a 401A supplemental plan? That answer is yes, subject to IRS annual contribution limits. And the plan, I believe, already has a copy of our opinion on that position.
Catherine,
So
mine would be just on, it's not a flat amount per person. So it would be different for different people. And that's the legal part that I was wondering about specifically.
Thank you. I would be happy to prepare an opinion on that.
It is an honorific governmental plan, and we've done many of these in the past. So we just want to let you know that too.
And is it correct that this proposal is just for active members? So once you retire, then there would be no longer any type of income replacement for retired members?
That is correct right now. The phase 1 of the study was to look at the active members. Phase 2 will be to look at the retirees. And please note, phase 2 right now, there is nothing in that part of it to change the benefit structure or payment of the retirees. It's looking at more of administratively either keeping it in-house or purchasing outside annuities, but it's not looking at changing what their guaranteed benefits are.
And I just wanted to throw out, I don't know if this is an option or not, and I know this isn't necessarily going to fit everybody's needs, but just looking at other options to, get closer to being equitable with our IPERS retirees. When we're retiring, if, have we ever considered getting insurance paid for as a retirement benefit that wouldn't be an option for IPERS retirees? Can we look at some other options? Maybe the payout for each year that you've worked is different for Des Moines retirees than it would be for IPERS retirees. That may, at least that to me would come across as, trying to make an effort to, right some wrongs along the way. I don't know.
Jolene, the current retirement incentive does account for a differential between DMTRS participants and IPERS participants. So there is a significant differential right now, and it was that way last year and then with this year's incentive. So there have been a few things, but I do appreciate your suggestions on other options that we could consider as well. I do want to move this meeting along a little bit. I think we're at a point, we were scheduled until 5. It's 5:25. Want to be cognizant of time, but schedule another meeting very soon for this committee to regroup after everybody's had time to digest things we've discussed today. And then we can meet again, and by then we should have an opinion from Catherine on the legalities of things, and then we can talk about the parameters and the assumptions that were built into the model and where we're more comfortable with. If very simply, it's been stated today that 11% was something that wasn't comfortable with. So do we want to use 8? And what does that do? And come up with some things that this group is very comfortable with. So then this group can move forward with a recommendation, because we've got to keep the wheels turning and keep this bus moving.
Kathy,
Yeah, Alan, if you can find that ticker that'll give me 11% over the next 10 years, let me know and I'll throw some cash that way.
can we?
I have shared the report with Kathy, the ticker symbol and the report using the FI360. The 10-year return on that fund is actually 11.45% as of 12/31/21.
Kathy, will we have access to that sort of spreadsheet tool so that we can do some of that work changing numbers so that we can put together something and get to a common understanding?
I don't have the full spreadsheet right now either. It's, I've seen pieces of it at times with snippets with not everybody's information. So I'll work through some of that with Mike and see what can be shared and what's proprietary to them.
Kathy, do you have any thoughts on the retirement incentive date? Is there flexibility for DMTRS people to get to where this comes to resolution? Do we think that this doesn't come to resolution quick enough that we just say it's there, that time is going to come, you're going to have to make a decision?
I would have to discuss that with Shashank, Matt, Susie on the date. I don't have the authority to move that date out. I think it's something that we can definitely discuss and talk about what the ramifications of moving that date are. And I could report back hopefully very soon with an answer to that for those individuals who are contemplating.
Hey, just to clarify, this is Terry. I had to step away for a moment. Blake, was your question about the early retirement option and being able to adjust the date on that?
Yeah, it was just the question of whether, are we going to force some people to make a decision when maybe we don't want to do that because we'd rather that they stay?
Sure. Gotcha. Thank you.
You're welcome. Team is meeting next week too soon?
I think we probably need to meet next week. I think there's plenty to continue to discuss. I'd rather meet often and get this moving. what works for everybody next week.
Can we do Thursday instead of Wednesday? Because it's getting really tight. Thursday might work better for me, but that's my point.
Same here. I'm not
Thursday.
available Monday through Wednesday.
I'm on
Thursday the
vacation,
9th.
but I'll try to attend.
Rosie, if you could set a meeting for Thursday the 9th at 4 p.m.
Okay.
And again, thank you everybody for your participation, your comments, your passion towards all of this.
And
We're
thank you
gonna
especially
we're gonna
Mike.
get there.
Huge thank you to Mike, because I know it's a lot of work and I know you're getting put in the middle of what's going on. Thank you, Mike.
Yes, thank you.
So my
Thank
last
you.
question
I look
is,
forward
are
to
we
working
going
with
to go
you.
through the rest of the agenda, or are we stopping now because we've been going on for an hour and a half?
I'd say we stop now, and if we can, we'll resume next week with more comments on TCG, but I think next week we'll put BTC first. I think Alan had a little bit of things he wanted to come back to the committee with from our last meeting. So we'll let Alan go first, if you're available Thursday, Alan.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay. So we'll put Alan first on Thursday and then continue with this TCG topic after that.
Thank you for your flexibility, Alan. I appreciate it. And also to Mike for your thoughts on this and for everybody's comments today. It was very helpful.
Thanks, everyone. Good seeing you all.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye, everybody.
We're
Thank
stopping.
you. Bye.
We're stopping. You're not.
Thanks, Rosie, for